Hey tribe, welcome back to another video. This is RayTube practice question number 50, and I have a mix of 5 brand new practice questions within this video, so stay tuned. Okay, so let's dive into it. A social worker meets with a colleague to discuss how they can collaborate and grow both of their private practices. The colleague offers to pay the social worker a fee for any referrals they send them. How should the social worker respond next? A. Negotiate a fair fee for any referrals sent by the social worker. B. Offer to merge private practices with the colleague to increase revenue. C. Decline the colleague's request and discuss other ways to obtain referrals. Or D. Agree to only refer the clients the social worker believes will be a good fit with the colleague. You know how we do? Pause the video, reread the question, reread the answer choices, select your best answer, unpause the video, and we'll dive into the explanation. Okay, if you picked C, you are correct. Why? So let's look at A. Negotiate a fair fee for any referral sent by the social worker. This is incorrect. According to the NASW Code of Ethics 1.16 Referral for Services, Section C, social workers are prohibited from giving or receiving payment for a referral when no professional service is provided by the referring social worker. So, this is why A is incorrect. Yes, collaborating with our fellow colleagues for business purposes and everything, cool, but not like this. And remember, if this wasn't in place, think about how ethical it would be to send a client to another social worker, another provider, where they actually may benefit from going to a different social worker, a different provider, but because there's that financial incentive, we may say okay. And when we look at B, offer to merge private practices with the colleague to increase revenue. This is incorrect. Well, I mean, technically, yeah, they're able to. There's nothing against the code of ethics about uh, uh, merging private practices, but although merging private practices can increase revenue, this option doesn't address the unethical offer presented by the colleague. We want to decline that. And that's what brings us to option C, decline the colleague's request and discuss other ways to obtain referrals. This is correct. Why? So, as social workers, we want to make sure every action we are taking has our client's best interest at heart, not our own. And like we were previously speaking to, of when there's a financial incentive there, that influences our decision making. We're human. And with our code of ethics, this is saying let's just eliminate that so that influence isn't there because, again, we have the client's best interest at heart. And also, paying someone or accepting payment for referrals is prohibited. The social worker may not act in the client's best interest due to the financial incentive. So, this is why C is the correct answer. And D, agree to only refer the clients the social worker believes will be a good fit with the colleague. This is incorrect. I know it sounds good, but although this option considers the client, the social worker would still be agreeing to participate in the unethical offer made by the colleague. We want to shut that down. Again, show grace to ourselves in the situation. We want to say, hey, colleague, I know we want to, grow our practices and, help more people and all that great stuff. But according to our code of ethics, that's a no go. It's prohibited. So that's why the correct answer is C, decline the colleague's request and discuss other ways to obtain referrals. Now let's dive into practice question number 2. A school social worker meets with a teenager who identifies as queer at the request of the principal. The principal reports that the teenager has missed several days of school within the past 2 weeks, and their parents are also concerned because their teenager refuses to talk with them about the situation. How should the social worker respond next? A. Educate the teenager about the consequences that could come from their truancy. B. Ask the teenager if they are having any suicidal thoughts. C. Ask the teenager if they recently experienced bullying at school. Or D. Inform the teenager that their rebellion is a normal part of development. You know how we do? Pause the video, reread through the question, reread through the answer choices, select your best answer, unpause the video, and we'll dive into the explanation. Okay. If you picked C, you are correct. Why? So let's look at A. Educate the teenager about the consequences that could come from their truancy. This is incorrect. Realistically, the teenager is already aware of the consequences that come from skipping school. And for those that don't know truancy, that's what it's speaking to of skipping school, class, all that stuff. Um, it's kind of like, hey, when did you first learn that skipping school had consequences and all of that? I imagine probably in elementary school, right? Just consequences in general that comes from school. What would this really do? This option wouldn't really do much for the given situation of, yep, we want to make sure we educate teenager. Hey, just so you know, skipping school has consequences to it, and you could get in big trouble. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure I'm sure they knew that. So it wouldn't really do anything for the situation. B, ask the teenager if they're having suicidal thoughts. This is incorrect. And we'll be like, wait a second, Ray. What about safety? Safety first, safety first, safety first. Here's the thing. Is it needed? Is it required? Is it a better option that we have available? Ask the teenager if they're having suicidal thoughts. This is incorrect. Nothing within the question warrants this action to be taken next by the social worker. Asking about possible bullying is a more relevant question to start with. And let's scroll back up to the question real quick. A school social worker meets with a teenager who identifies as queer at the request of the principal. The principal reports that the teenager has missed several days of school within the past 2 weeks, and their parents are also concerned because their teenager refuses to talk with them about the situation. What should the social worker do next? How should the social worker respond next? Now, we may say, but see, Ray, look, right there, the teenager isn't talking to their parents. Well, when we go to the correct answer, which is C, ask the teenager if they recently experienced bullying at school. This is the correct option. Given the information within the question, exploring what's been happening within the environment can be helpful because they're missing school, right? It's not like they ran away from home and like they're not talking to like anybody and and we're meeting with them together to discuss what's been going on. According to a guide for understanding, supporting, and affirming LGBTQ I2S children, youth, and families, research on the experiences of school age young people who are LGBT has found that a large majority of these students report hearing anti gay remarks and experiencing harassment or assault at school because of their sexual orientation or gender expression. This contributes to students skipping class or school altogether. These experiences are also associated with higher levels of depression and lower levels of academic achievement, which makes sense because they're literally not in school. So it wouldn't make sense for them to excel academically. But let me ask this. Have you or someone you know ever skipped class or school because of bullying? Do you know, have you or you know someone when they were a teenager not be as talkative, as vocal with their parents, their caregivers about bullying going on at school? So it makes sense to say, "Hey, what's school life been like?" Or in this, because we can only work with the provided options, the provided answer choices. Hey, what's going on with that environment? Have you been experiencing any bullying, anything like that? Because if they are, then we can tackle that issue instead of just saying, "Oh, wait, no, possible suicide. They're gonna end their life, hurt themselves, or something like that." Nothing. Oh, Ray, what about if they wrote like a letter, like a goodbye letter or something like that? That's completely different. That's not what was mentioned within the question. And when we look at D, inform the teenager that their rebellion is a normal part of development. This is incorrect. Why? This would be a form of validating their behavior of skipping school, and it doesn't address what's contributing to their behavior. And not for nothing, if it was a normal part of development, why would they be getting in trouble for it? Because it's a normal part of development. So that's why this one is C, ask the teenager if they recently experienced bullying at school. Okay, let's go to practice question number 3. A social worker is conducting an experiment for a new program with a group of participants diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder. The program has a high success rate for those that participate. With ethical considerations in mind, the social worker allows each person to choose whether they want to participate in the new program or not. What best describes the social worker's research design? A. Experimental design. B. Quasi experimental design. Or C. Single subject research design. Again, you know how we do. Pause the video, read through the question, read through the answer choices, select your best answer, unpause, and then we'll dive into the explanation. Okay, if you picked B, you are correct. Why? So A, experimental design, this is incorrect. In a standard experiment, the researcher randomly assigns the participants into either the control group or experimental group, which makes it a true experiment. This is what you want to look for when you see experimental design. How are the participants, which is the people that are going to be participating in the research, the experiment, how were they assigned? Were they randomly assigned, or was it a bit more hand selection or their decision? If they weren't randomly assigned to either the control or experimental group, it is not a true experiment. So that's why A is incorrect. B, a quasi experimental design. This is correct. Why? So with quasi, it actually means kind of, sort of, not really. And when I hear quasi, it's kind of like quasi. It's like kind of, sort of, not really. It's still an experimental design, but it's not a true experiment in regards of the participants were randomly assigned to the controller experimental group. In a quasi experiment, the researcher assigns participants into either the control group or experimental group based on non random criteria. This is used when random assignment is not feasible or ethical, like it was mentioned within the question, and individuals are allowed to self select into groups or interventions. Since this program has proven to be beneficial to those diagnosed with PTSD, it will be unethical for some participants not to receive the treatment of the new program, which would be the control group. This approach allows the program to be evaluated while respecting participants' autonomy. So that's why the correct answer is B, quasi experimental design. And C is incorrect, single subject research design. Why? This focuses on how an intervention impacts a single slash individual's behavior, not a group of people. So when we look at the question, this is more reflective of a quasi experimental design. Okay, so now let's look at practice question number 4. A social worker meets with an 80-year-old adult who reports feeling lonely and upset because he hasn't been to the community center or spoken with his adult children in 2 months since his caregiver is upset with him for being too needy. The client blames himself and says he's trying to be more independent, but is difficult due to his physical limitations. What should the social worker do next? A. Schedule a meeting with the client and their caregiver to discuss the situation. B. Provide the client with resources to improve their well being. Or C. Contact Adult Protective Services to report the caregiver's behavior. Again, pause the video, read through the question, read through the answer choices, select your best answer, unpause the video, and then we'll dive into it. Okay, if you picked C, contact Adult Protective Services to report the caregiver's behavior, you are correct. Why? So, A, schedule a meeting with the client and their caregiver to discuss the situation. This is incorrect. Given the scenario, enough information was provided to warrant an APS report. And we're going to dive into that in a second. B, provide the client with resources to improve their well being. This is incorrect. While resources are important, the client mentioned quote unquote red flags that need to be addressed. And that's why C, contact Adult Protective Services to report the caregiver's behavior, is the correct answer. So, according to the National Adult Protective Services Association, NAPSA, when to report. When we look at this checklist, If you witness a life threatening situation involving a senior or adult with disabilities, dial 911. Contact your local adult protective services agency anytime you observe or suspect the following. And we didn't directly observe this or even suspect this. This is what the adult client is reporting to us, and nothing mentioned within the question stated the client having any cognitive impairment, so they're not in their right frame of mind. So the information they're providing is invalid just because they're 80 years old. It's like no. And again, according to this, the National Adult Protective Services Association, and this is what the client reported to us: sudden inability to meet essential physical, psychological, or social needs, which threatens health, safety, or well being. Disappearing from contact with neighbors, friends, or family. And remember, what did the question say? A social worker meets with an 80-year-old adult who reports feeling lonely and upset because he hasn't been to the community center or spoken with his adult children in 2 months since his caregiver is upset with him for being too needy. So the caregiver is denying those social needs of saying, hey, you're too needy and I'm annoyed with you. So you're not going to be speaking with your adult children and you're not going to be going to that community center. And it's been 2 months. And the client, the 80-year-old adult client, is saying, it's kind of my fault. I'm working on being independent, but I can't because of my physical limitations. So when we scroll back down to look at the checklist, again, disappearing from contact with neighbors, friends, or family, appearing hungry, malnourished, or with a sudden weight loss, appearing disoriented or confused, suddenly appearing disheveled or wearing soiled clothing, failing by caregivers to arrive as scheduled, or disappearing without notice, living in squalor or hazardous situations such as hoarding or cluttering. So, based off of this information right here, this is considered emotional neglect and isolation. And I'll put a direct link down below because, again, this comes from the National Adult Protective Services Association. And when to report, contact your local adult protective services agency anytime you observe directly or suspect. Well, the client told us. So there's no suspect. They told us. And here are the highlighted points within the question. And question number 5. A social worker meets with a client at an outpatient facility to complete an evaluation. The client reports experiencing an increase in productivity at work last week, but currently experiencing low mood and sleep throughout most of the day. What is the most likely diagnosis? A. Major depressive disorder. B. Bipolar 1 disorder. C. Bipolar 2 disorder. Or D. Cyclothymic disorder. You already know. Pause the video. Let's reread through the question and the answer choices. Select our best answer. Unpause and let's get into it. Okay. If you picked C, you are correct. Why? So, with major depressive disorder, this is incorrect. The client reports symptoms of low mood and sleeping throughout most of the day, which are symptoms of MDD. But the question also mentions other symptoms of an increase in productivity at work last week. We don't want to ignore that. It's not like we're getting a tremendous amount of information. So, the information that we get, we don't want to just focus on one or two details and then just overlook everything else. We want to focus on all of it. B, bipolar 1 disorder, this is incorrect. Why? So, with bipolar 1 disorder, and this is the most severe out of all of them, with they enter a mania or manic state. This is the most severe and usually cannot function appropriately. Doing things that are considered risky, irresponsible, impulsive, and or dangerous. Ray, what about this example? If they're driving real fast, would you consider that behavior risky, irresponsible, impulsive, and or dangerous? Ray, what about this situation over here? Would you consider that situation risky, irresponsible, impulsive, and or dangerous? And again, with bipolar 1, it's the most severe. And that's why hospitalization is usually required due to the severity of their manic behavior. There's a 99.999% chance someone in a manic state is going to be hospitalized because of the severity of their behavior. And an episode of major depressive disorder, it can occur, but it's not super common. That's why it's not like a hard criteria where for bipolar 1 it needs to occur. It's not common. But that's why this one isn't bipolar 1, because there's nothing about significant severe behavior mentioned within the question. Now, when we look at bipolar 2 disorder, just to touch on the entire bipolar family, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and cyclothymic disorder can all experience increased/elevated mood and increased self-esteem, increase in productivity, which was mentioned within the question, an increase in goal-directed activities, and a decreased need for sleep. That's in all of them. But the severity of them, that's what matters. And then cyclothymic, the time frame in particular. So with bipolar 2, they experience something called hypomania, which is a less severe form of mania, plus major depressive disorder. And it's like, wait a second, Ray, you mean like MDD, like that entire disorder? Yep. For bipolar 2, it has to be there. It has to be there. It has to be there. An episode of major depressive disorder is required. And because bipolar 2 isn't as severe as bipolar 1, because bipolar 1 usually requires hospitalization because of the severity, with bipolar 2, hospitalization is usually not, NOT, not required, like going inpatient, since the symptoms of hypomania are not as severe as mania and the person can still function appropriately. In the time frame, hypomanic symptoms have been occurring for 4 days or longer, and they experience at least one episode of MDD. It has to be there. It has to be there. It has to be there. And the time frame for bipolar 1, manic symptoms have been occurring for 7 days or longer. And again, with hypomania, the symptoms have been occurring for 4 days or longer. They can occur for 7 days. It says 4 days or longer. But when we look at the severity, it's not here. The client reports experiencing an increase in productivity, just like all of them, at work last week, but currently experiencing low mood and sleeping throughout most of the day. Nothing in this question will warrant bipolar 1 over bipolar 2, which is the correct answer. And then when we look at D, cyclothymic disorder, this is incorrect. Why? This is a less severe form of bipolar 2 consisting of ups and downs regarding their mood. Time frame, symptoms have been occurring for 1 year or more for children and 2 years or more for adults. And I'm pretty confident on the exam, if we get the question where the correct answer is cyclothymic disorder, they're going to mention this time frame for how long it's been going on. And because they didn't mention anything about significant severity or an extended time frame within this question, and they mentioned symptoms of hypomania and MDD. That's why the correct answer for this one is C, bipolar 2 disorder. Okay, tribe, that's it for today's video. Again, that was RayTube practice question number 50, which contained a mix of 5 brand new practice questions for you guys. And remember, doing at least 2 practice questions a day and at least 1 practice exam a month helps keep the exam anxiety at bay. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell a social work friend, because we don't want to be licensed by ourselves. And you got this. Listen, the license is already ours. We just got to go there and get it. I know this exam can feel overwhelming, daunting. We want our life back from studying for this exam and everything. Consistency. 2 a day, 1 practice exam a month. Go in there, get what's yours, and let's continue on our social work journey. You got this. All right, tribe. I'll see you next video.